Hello, wine enthusiasts. It's Jeff. As you join me on the wine road today, you'll hear two diametrically opposed winemakers. The large and firmly established C.K. Mondavi and family's fairly new winemaker, Randy Herron, and the scrappy and tenacious Katy Wilson of her boutique brand, LaRue Wines. Let's hit the road.
In the price range for C.K. Mondavi, it is tough competition. There's a lot of very large wineries, a lot of talented winemakers we're competing against. So really trying to make sure that I'm putting the best foot forward in every bottle that we sell.
I actually started LaRue the year that I left Flowers, and when I left Flowers, I hadn't intended to start LaRue. But when Robert came and hired me, he said to me, like, hey, if you want to make your own wine here, you can.
The C.K. Mondavi and family brand of Napa Valley has been around since 1946. Katy of Sonoma County is celebrating her 10th anniversary with LaRue this summer. C.K. Mondavi and family are nationally distributed and produce a very large amount of wine each year. Katy makes about 500 cases. Yes, polar opposites. But as you'll hear, these two winemakers could have been brother and sister with their easygoing nature and to whom laughter comes effortlessly. I'll start with Randy. And as you'll hear, Randy's background made him a prime candidate to work for such a large company as C.K. Mondavi and family.
Yeah, absolutely. It was funny because it was a mutual friend that put me in contact with them and said, hey, this guy really I think he has a lot of background experience. This would be a natural fit for your winery. He has a lot of comfort, and he's actually made a lot of wine for most of your competition. So I bring a lot of experience, but with that, I also bring my passion. I've only worked for family-owned wineries in my entire career. Oh, wow. So it's, when you work for a passionate family and you bring your own passion, it's a match made in heaven.
Another of those families was Gallo. And man, that must have been quite a training ground for you.
Yeah. I worked in the mid-'90s to the mid-2000s for Gallo, and it was unbelievable when they were going under a lot of changes. So we were developing almost a brand every year, every other year. Unbelievable resources of research. And then also, when I was there, I started in my 20s. There was the winemakers in their late 40s and 50s, and there was winemakers in their 70s. So it was like three generations of winemakers, and I was being on the younger end. And some of the young guys I start with are highly successful in the California wine industry for other wineries too. So it was a tremendous experience to be rubbing elbows with people that have been making wine since the 50s and 60s. And just, the stories, the adventures, just the little subtle trainings and hints they picked up over the years and decades was really tremendous. Coming in there with open eyes and ears and just listening and learning was unbelievable.
Yeah, what a beneficial learning environment.
Yeah, and then really the more you wanted to learn, the more that you were given. I was fortunate enough to work with men like Peter Vella and Guido Croce, Spir Ballatore. So they were a tremendous resource. Also on the research end, I worked with Rich Morazzoni, who probably taught me more about wine microbiology than I ever learned in any class. And he was very passionate about it, and I had great talks and learning lessons from him.
You throw these names around like we're supposed to know who they are.
I think you probably only recognize Ballatore Champagne, Spir Ballatore, and Peter Vella Box Wines was Peter Vella. So those are actually brands. But a lot of these people, because Gallo was a little, didn't always share all their information back then. They're a lot more open. A lot of people don't know, but it was tremendous to work with some of the real pioneers in the California wine industry, and also to work with a company that had the resources to really educate you beyond the basics of winemaking. And I was there for over a decade.
That experience at Gallo greatly prepared him for his next venture, Casella Family Brands in Australia. Now, that name may not sound familiar, but they bottle Yellowtail, that huge international brand that has the kangaroo on the bottle. Surely you've seen it. Randy was hired to help them manage their explosion in case production.
Yeah, they recruited me a little bit out of Gallo, and one of the things is Yellowtail was a great success. The owner, John Casella, was a great winemaker at another winery. He came back to his home family winery. It was only 50,000 cases, and really had the passion to develop the Yellowtail flavor profile and style, and was able to get the label and also have some other things breaking their way, and they went from 50,000 cases to 3 million cases to 6 million cases to 9 to 12 million cases, all in a short time of 5 years. I kind of came in towards the end of the ramp up, but one of the things it was first winery I worked at where everything was new. Because they literally had to build everything from scratch, because there was they turned to one of the biggest facilities in all Australia from 0 to 3 years. So it was an unbelievable process, and it was a great opportunity. And once again, great learning, and also great learning to kind of take what I was taught and mentored at Gallo and able to use it in a new company. So I was fortunate enough to come in. I started as a senior winemaker. Then within a year or so, I was promoted to chief winemaker, where I was in charge of the whole winemaking staff and handling crush and all the responsibilities with that. And then even wearing a lot of hats in Australia. After a couple of years of that, I ended up running the cellar. So it was a great opportunity. Really appreciate the Casella family. They were tremendous people to work for. I really enjoyed it. And it was a great adventure for not only me, but my young family to, pick up and move California and then land in Australia for 7 years and, be the Americans in town, which was very interesting and funny.
You said your kids were like babies and toddlers.
Yeah, both my children started kindergarten in Australia. So my daughter was 3 when we moved there, and when we moved back, she had a very heavy accent. It was really cute and funny. She's getting back to normal now.
You were telling me, too, this was a really small town.
Yeah. Actually, Yenda, where the winery was 800 people. And Casella employed about 400 on site. The town that was a couple miles down the road, Griffith, was 20,000 people. But literally, there was 20,000 people, and that was the biggest town for about 2.5 hours. So, and there was 8 to 10 other wineries in town. So the wine industry was like this, in this 20,000 people, everybody pretty much worked for a winery or some aspect of winery or was a farmer. And that was the whole industry for, everything. The one thing about living in rural Australia I really enjoyed, it was the sense of community. There was a baker, there was a butcher, there was a produce shop. Yes, we had a grocery store, but it was local.
Market.
Market. The main street was live on Saturday mornings from 8 a.m. to noon. People would come in from the farms and do all their shopping and everything, and it was just very jovial. It was very community centric, and so it was really nice and interesting to grow up in that, and have my children grow up in that. That's a different sense of community.
Real small town, rural situation.
Yes. Credit was still good. If you didn't have the money, we'll fix you up later and stuff.
Handshake deals.
Yes. So it was very good, and it was a great time, and really enjoyed it.
Well, with that experience there with Yellowtail and the Casella family, it's no wonder Mondavi saw you as a great asset.
Yeah, I was able to bring a lot of different background and stuff. It's funny, even when I was at Yellowtail, boss would ask, how do they do this at Gallo?
Yeah, I'm sure Randy offers a wealth of information. Well, I suppose we spent enough time talking about the competition. Now let's hear about Randy's position at CK Mondavi and family. Do you know that brand goes back to 1946, when Cesare Mondavi created a new line of affordable everyday wines? CK Mondavi, with and family, added by the 4th generation, continues to pave the way for future generations. I'm talking with Randy Herron, CK Mondavi and family's recently hired winemaker, and he understands the work that has preceded him and is experienced and confident enough to take the brand further.
The previous winemaker, John Monet and Charlie, have done a great job on the CK brand, and one of the things is I'm just trying to carry the torch to keep it going. Mark Mondavi's, put pretty much his whole career into the CK brand, and we're rolling up on 75 years now. So now I'm the one that gets to champion it, So trying to just take it into the next level. So it's been a lot of fun, and it's really great. We grow about 50-60% of our own grapes, come off our own vineyards for the CK brand, and then the balance is just a handful of growers out of mainly the Lodi region, which is great because I deal with a handful of small family growers that been handpicked, and Mark has actually worked with most of their families for 50 to 60 years. So it on that aspect, how we source our grapes and stuff, we're still small. You do 1.4 million cases, but we still have some small, grow half ourselves and only have 6 or 7 growers that produce the rest for our whole company. So, having that intimacy is very nice, even on such a large scale.
Yeah, your quote where you said you plan to continue the legacy of crafting high-quality yet approachable wines that over-deliver for the price point. And the key element in that, over-delivering for the price point, is this relationship they have with the vineyards.
In the price range where CK Mondavi is, you have to be out there. It is tough competition. There's a lot of very large wineries, a lot of wineries, a lot of talented winemakers we're competing against. So really trying to make sure that I'm putting the best foot forward in every bottle that we sell is very important for the whole industry.
I should point out for those who are not aware that the price point, the suggested price point for the CK brand is $6.99. So you don't hear a lot about complexity and depth of flavor with that level. Mm-hmm. But man, I think you guys are nailing it.
Yeah, and one of the things we just, always like to say, we start with a great nose, have fruit, have flavor, and finish with a nice body. So there's 3 layers of the wine, even at that price. And also one of the things, varietally correct. The Merlot tastes like a Merlot, the Cabernet tastes like Cabernet, Chardonnay is distinctly Chardonnay, and the Sauvignon Blanc has Sauvignon Blanc characteristics at that price range, really trying to be true to the character of the varietals. One of the things, because a lot of people, it's the introductory brand or it's the everyday brand, the everyday Cabernet they're going to have, and they have something special on the weekend. Yeah. So trying to be really dedicated to the true varietal characteristics is one of the goals, and also being able to deliver that is the main goal. And approachability is not overly cloying or sweet, but very easy to drink. So you're going back for the second glass.
Yeah, we met during a fantastic luncheon at Mark Mondavi's house recently, and I was impressed with how well the wines went with the good variety of food they served. And some of the wines on hand and part of the list are Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, and Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and a really nice red blend.
Yeah. I want to make the wines approachable, but have enough body to carry when they're served with food.
We had some really nice meat and barbecue that day.
Yeah. Yes, we had outstanding smoked pig and an excellent barbecue sauce. And that's the thing is you have to have enough body and flavor and varietal character to be able to carry those strong, pungent flavors that were coming off the smoked barbecue. And that's one of the things in the price range to try to deliver, that it matches up with food well, and the wine's strong enough and has enough body and flavor to carry through a meal.
During the luncheon, you introduced us to a couple of new brands that you're releasing. Tell me about those.
Yeah, we are starting a kind of a seasonal wine release. Our first one is going to be Sweet Red. It's just been released this last month. And one of the things is we're kind of looking at the market and seeing that there's sweet reds in the price range, and we don't really have any sweet offering. So we decided let's try Sweet Red. It's doing well in the market for other companies, and it was just have some fun. And we released it. It'll be released through the summer, through the fall, and the winter, and then next year our next seasonal release is going to be a Rosé Moscato Spritzer, and that will be coming out in probably the new year. But also we've brought back Moscato. They had Moscato in the past. They've gone away from it, and we decided we really want a fun summer release. And once again, trying to be kind of more flexible. And so we have a really light body Moscato, and we're releasing that for, once again, through the summer into the fall.
Sure. I liked that one, and I'm not a big Moscato fan, and I'm not even a very much of a sweet fan. That's not dessert or port. Yeah. But I could see where that would work pretty well with some things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's around 10 alcohol, so we're a little lower alcohol than a lot of traditional wines. Easy, approachable. After you mow the lawn, you have a cold glass of it and enjoy it, and it doesn't build up on you too much.
Now, is this for the millennial generation? Is it for some of the people in the Midwest who like that sweeter palate?
Exactly. The Moscato was a strong request from our Midwestern partners and some of the East Coast. And same thing with the sweet red, does very well in the South and the East Coast and the Midwest too. So that's basically, we're trying to take feedback that we're getting from the market and also look at some different offerings and seeing what people want. I mean, there's the traditional wines, but there's a whole set of different style wines out there that are selling and doing well. And we look at it as a nice way to kind of test the waters of where some of these blends are and, what the people like them and not. And I mean, and I want to say is like on the sweet red, we kind of redid the packaging. It was gorgeous. Change the coloring a little bit. And so there's just not only the wine, it's the packaging.
I think we all need starter wines. We all had our Boone's Farm and whatever when we were younger. And so this is perfect for that. And I imagine, especially with the sweet wines, that it'll help people develop a flavor for dessert wines and port.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and the thing is like, I always look at CK as a starter and people can trade up, or it's like I say, every day. So yeah, anything we can get the whole wine industry, if it's us or another winery, to get approachable wines so people can start enjoying them, consuming them, and and then they'll find out what they like. The greatest question as a winemaker, what wine do you recommend? Well, what wine do you like? Everybody's different. Everybody has their own palate and flavors, and so I encourage people to go out there and try it. You're not going to like every wine, but you are going to find a certain style and type of wine or varietal that you really enjoy.
And with the Mondavis now in their G4, as they call them, the fourth generation of Mondavis, the younger generation is doing their brand. And of course, you have Charles Krug here in Napa Valley. So a great variety of wines to go up into.
Yeah. And then also we are just coming out with in the next year, Flat Top Hills is another wine offering that we're coming out with. And it just started on the East Coast a little bit. It's very still in its infancy stage. Hasn't been released that long. And that's a cab, red blend, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and a rosé offering.
What price range is that?
The reds are about $16 and the whites are $14.
Okay. Yeah, I remember Mark mentioning that. He was talking about how that was in pre-release right now.
Yes, that's a pre-release. I hope I didn't spill the beans too early. But
oh, yeah. Should we be mentioning that? There's a secret for you. Well, since you spent some time in Australia, do you anticipate Grenache or Syrah coming down the line?
Well, actually, the rosé I made for that flat top is a Grenache-based rosé.
Oh, great.
I would love to make a red Grenache here. After spending time in Australia and getting some of the best tasting the top, because a lot of people don't export all their best wines because they don't have to, because you could sell it. Yeah. And being in the industry there, you really find, and I really love red Grenache as a wine. It's soft, it's delicate. If it's made right, it shows fruit and flavor. It's beautiful. So
some of my favorites.
Yes.
Barossa Valley, Grenache, and Old Vine
Valley, Barossa Valley is some excellent wines.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No. I just hope everybody has a great day and enjoys a glass of CK.
Well, welcome back to California, and I'm sure we'll be crossing the paths again.
Oh, thank you so much for your time, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Randy Herron, who is poised to grow the CK Mondavi and family brand into the tens of millions of cases. Well, they may not want to go that far, but he could do it if needed. By the way, I thought I'd run through the Mondavi family tree to help you understand who is who. It all began in 1861 when Charles Krug established the first winery in Napa Valley. In 1943, Italian immigrants Cesare and Rosa Mondavi, along with their sons Robert and Peter, purchased the estate. They kept the Charles Krug name and built it into a world-class winery. But like brothers can be, Peter and Robert had different personalities and strengths. Robert Mondavi decided to leave the family business and opened his own winery in 1966, the first new winery in Napa Valley since Prohibition. Peter continued his work at Charles Krug, along with his two sons, Peter Jr. and Mark. Peter Jr. spends most of his time with the Charles Krug brand, with help from his brother, yet Mark, with his daughters, nephew, and niece, the G4 as they call themselves, operate the CK Mondavi and family brand. Angelina, Alicia, Rihanna, and Giovanna contribute in various ways and are all brand ambassadors. Peter Jr.'s kids, Leah and Lucio, also serve as brand ambassadors. Learn more about the family's easy-drinking, low-cost brand at ckmondavi.com. Mondavi is Mondavi. I'll take a short break and return with Katy Wilson of LaRue Wines. And now it's time to delve into the history, the unknown, the meaningful trivia that surrounds the beverage we so adore. It's time for Wine Uncorked. Have you heard about the gods of wine? In Greek mythology, Dionysus was the god of the grape harvest, winemaking, of ritual madness and fertility. Interestingly, festivals celebrating him were the driving force behind the development of Greek theater. Dionysus may have been worshipped as early as 1500 BC. For the Romans, the god of wine was known as Bacchus. He was also the Roman god of good cheer, mirth, and ecstasy. It is written that Roman festivals thrown in the name of Bacchus, Bacchanalia, got a bit out of hand, becoming scandalous, extremely colorful, ecstatic events, to the point where the Roman Senate prohibited the festivals, viewing them as a religious cult. It is believed that thousands of revelers were jailed and even put to death. You can find all kinds of paintings and sculptures based on both gods of wine in libraries, museums, and Google Images. Be warned, they can be graphic, enticingly so. Now we're going to make our way over the Mayacamas Mountains, leaving Napa Valley behind, and head toward the cooler Sonoma Coast region to learn more about the young Katy Wilson of LaRue Wines. As far back as 2013, respected wine writer John Bonet wrote that Katy is a winemaker to watch, and rightly so. She makes aromatic, elegant, cool climate Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Incredibly, Katy is one of just about 4% of female winemakers who own their own brand. And another stat is, only about 10% of California winemakers are women. I started with Katy by saying that number surprises me because it seems like about 40% of the interviews I do with winemakers are women.
So it seems to be growing, at least the accessibility of them are.
Yeah, I think that the publicity of women winemakers has grown tremendously in the last 10 years. But when it comes down to it, there's still a lot more men than women.
There must be a lot of head winemakers that aren't doing as much work, whereas some of their assistants are doing a lot of the work, and I'm sure many of those are women.
Yeah, they're definitely, I would say the assistant winemakers is probably getting closer to 50-50 men and women. And yeah, it's kind of breaking through that last step of being a head winemaker, and there's very few.
Yeah. And you're one of the few female winemakers who also is a winery owner. You've joined the ranks of Mary Edwards, Carol Shelton, Carol Meredith, Heidi Barrett, Kathy Corison, so it's quite good company.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about that. When I started LaRue almost 10 years ago, I'm very small still even. And when I was started, I was only 300 cases. And so it is kind of crazy when I see my wine on a wine list or when somebody says something like that. Because I'm like, oh, wow, that's insane. Wouldn't it, you don't feel like you're in the ranks of those women, but it's pretty cool.
Right. And you're so young, though. That's the other thing. These other ladies are quite a bit older.
Yeah, I was able to get started pretty early. I decided to become a winemaker when I was just 18, and I grew up on a walnut orchard in the Central Valley of California and went to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. Okay. So I started there with agricultural business as my major, and my freshman year there, in Ag Business 101, they started talking about different things that you could do, and they started talking about wine. I was just like, that's it. I know what I want to do. I was always interested in agriculture, and I knew that was something that was important to me, but the wine part of it is definitely brings a lot more chemistry, and then you have the creativity that you're making the grapes into wine, and it's something totally different, and just like how social the industry is, and it's just a really great industry to be in. So I decided to do a double major my freshman year at Cal Poly. So I have a degree in wine and viticulture as well as agricultural business.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
hence being an owner of a winery.
Yeah, my LaRue Wines was my senior project at Cal Poly. I wrote a business plan to start a small winery, and here it is.
Okay, so that explains why you're an owner in your mid-30s.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, congratulations. And now you're all the way up to 500 cases.
Yeah, so that was my business plan. It was always to stay small. I never intended LaRue to be in the thousands of cases, let alone, bigger than that. So I always wanted to be able to do everything myself and really take time to be in the vineyards and to be taking care of all of my barrels and to do tastings and really be a part of every step of the way. So for me, it was definitely a plan to stay that small.
Yeah. Let's put LaRue on hold for a moment because you are staying small, but you sure keep busy because you're a winemaker for like 4 other wineries. And ones we all respect, Annabo Wines. My niece and her husband are here, and we've been over to Annabo with them before. Claypool Cellars, Reeve Wines, and another favorite of ours, Smith Story Wine Cellars. So how do you have the time to deal with all of them and then also work on your own wines?
I work a lot. But yeah, it is definitely a constant juggling of different appointments and seeing vineyards. But I definitely make it all happen, but it is quite a juggle. And I just like when I'm looking at vineyards, I will go and look at say going to Anderson Valley, I can go to vineyards for Reeve and for Smith Story and check out vineyards for both wineries at the same time. And just a lot of hard work, though, is what it really comes down to.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that one of the major responsibilities that a winemaker has is traveling. You're always on the road, aren't you?
Yeah, I put almost 1,000 miles on my car this week. Wow. Yeah, I drive a lot.
For LaRue Wines, Katy focuses on cool climate, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. But working with the other wineries gives her a chance to break out of that Chardonnay Pinot role and play with some other varieties that can also be intriguing.
Yeah, I'm making almost 20 different varieties now with all my different clients. And it's really, I love it. I spent 5 years working at Cayman Wines in Sonoma. And they make Cabernet and Syrah and Viognier, and I really do love making other varieties. And so when I started working with Reeve and Smith Story, being able to make Cabernet again and Cabernet Franc and Merlot, it's really just, it's fun and kind of spreading your wings a little bit more, and it's a good to kind of have that diversity and putting everything in perspective, because if I was just doing LaRue and only focusing on those 500 cases as far as my complete, everything I make wine for, I feel like you kind of get tunnel vision, and to be able to see what's going on all over Sonoma County and Anderson Valley and really like through the growing season, and it kind of puts everything in perspective, and you're able to just kind of have a better well-roundedness. And yeah,
I think as a typical winemaker, even if you tried to focus just on LaRue, you couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's definitely, I do love making wine for other people, and I love seeing how excited, like Allie and Eric or Noah from Reeve or John, the owner of Annaba. It's like everybody, when they're tasting wine that I've made that they are tasting and really love, it's just really exciting to see.
Some of your owners have been in the business for a while, and I'm sure they join you in a lot of the decisions that are made and play quite a role themselves.
Yeah, every winery I work with is a little bit different. And for example, at Smith Story Wines, Eric and I work together on the winemaking. For Reeve Wines, Noah and I work together along with Ross Cobb on the winemaking and making all the decisions and the types of what wines we're going to be making. With Annaba Wines, Ross Cobb and I work on the winemaking, and sometimes the owner John Sweezy and his son John Michael are around to do the blending trials and everything, which is always fun and exciting to do. And with Claypool Cellars, Ross Cobb and I work together on that, and again with sometimes with Les Claypool and his wife Cheney, working on blending and all that as well. So.
Let's chat briefly about the wine we're drinking. We're in the middle of a tasting, so we're kind of bouncing back and forth between tasting and interviewing, and you poured us the Chardonnay.
So it's a vineyard about a mile away from where we're at now. Right now we're at the Emmeline Ann Vineyard, and so this is from the Charles Heinz Vineyard, which is just about a mile or two north of us, and it's really close to Occidental, and the Heinz family has owned the property since the late 1800s, and the vines where I get the Chardonnay from are about 40 years old. So it's the Old Wente clone, and I ferment the wine in barrel in once-used French oak barrels and age it for 16 months in barrel, and then let it go as it wants through malolactic fermentation, so it's partway through malo. And really is just wanting it to be really crisp and fresh and have a lot of minerality and a lot of citrus notes, but have the body still of a good Chardonnay. Mm.
Yeah, the lack of new oak really lets the grape variety shine. You know, you can really taste the Chardonnay, I think, a little bit more. And I could tell that there was some oak on it, but it's subtle, and it's a delicious Chardonnay.
Thank you. Yeah. And the other thing that I do too is I will leave it on original lees as long as I can, as long as the lees are smelling and tasting fresh. And I don't stir very much, but by doing that, it really builds a lot of mid-palate texture and breadth to the wine.
It's got its creaminess and softness on the palate, but it's not that oaky, buttery.
Yeah, I don't want it to be too zingy and just mineral and acid. I like that it's a little bit of both. So
it's a perfect balance.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's pause right here and enjoy that, and then maybe get into something else, and then we'll pick back up.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
You hear a number of glasses clinking there because my wife Meredith, my niece Riley, and her husband Matt joined me for the interview and tasting. And Matt's a fan of Chardonnay, and he gave a big thumbs up to Katy's Charles Heinz LaRue Chardonnay. Okay, so we had a couple of Pinots during our break. The first one was Sonoma Coast, and I was wondering about that because it looked like most of your wines were single vineyard, but you do get to play around a little bit with blending using creating the Sonoma Coast brand.
Yeah, so the Sonoma Coast is a blend of my single vineyard wines. And so what I do is when I'm picking the fruit, I ferment all of the clones separately from each vineyard. And I'll actually press those to barrel. And then from that point on, I'm treating them as totally separate lots. So every barrel is its own little vessel. And so when I'm doing a racking, for example, which is just taking the wine off of the lees that settle, which are just the solids that settle through aging. When I'm doing a racking, so taking the wine off of those lees, I will do one barrel at a time, and I can taste through. I only have 20 barrels, so when I'm tasting, I may say, okay, this one needs to be racked, but maybe the one next to it doesn't. And so after 15, 16 months, every single of those barrels are totally different. And so I am able to pick the barrels that are a little bit more fruit forward, making a blend that's meant to drink a little younger, and those become the Sonoma Coast. And then for the single vineyard wines, I'm picking barrels that are a little bit more focused, a little bit meant to age a little longer, and really just trying to pick the barrels that are a good picture of that vineyard and that vintage. It's kind of a unique thing. And so I'll do the blending trials at about 15 or 16 months, and then put those all back to barrel. And at 20 months is when I bottle. So my Pinots age for 20 months and the Chardonnay for 16 months.
Right. And the interesting thing about your blend is you have the Pommard clone in there as well as the 777, two distinctly different clones. The Pommard's earthier, the 777 tends to be more fruity. So, and you can kind of taste that in the wine, which is nice. And I guess, is it the 667 that kind of balances things out?
Yeah, and I think that there's a little bit of 115 in there too. So I think that having that that kind of blend of all the clones really brings a good diversity to the wine, and it makes a very versatile wine as well too.
Yeah, quite complex. You can taste the different layers in the one. And now we're drinking the Emmeline Ann Vineyard, which is right out in front of us here. A small vineyard. So this one's from 14, did you say?
Yeah, so this is a 2014. I made just 75 cases. And this vineyard is planted to 777 and 115 clones. And the Emmeline Ann is named after Nancy's grandmother, and Wayne and Nancy are the owners of Wayne and Nancy Honeycutt are the owners of the vineyard here. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but LaRue is named after my great grandmother.
I was going to get to that. But.
Yeah. So her name was Fiona LaRue, and so the LaRue Emmeline Ann is a tribute to the grandmothers.
Right. This wine is beautiful, and once again, the 777's in there, one of my favorites. So I just adore this Pinot Noir. So very nice.
Thank you. Yeah.
Too bad you don't have more of it.
Yeah, I have a few cases only. Yeah.
And it's fun to come out here and do the tasting right next to the vineyard. And I was going to ask you, and then I noticed it on the website, that you do open it to the public. It's not just for wine club members. So anybody can make an appointment and come out here and join you if you have the time and try the wines right here.
Yeah, I do tastings by appointment, and it's really just as the schedule allows, and it's really a special little tasting. When the weather is nice and sunny, we sit out on the deck and overlook the vineyard. Right now, it's a little bit foggy, so we're inside, but it's still
and windy and cool.
Yeah, definitely. But we have a nice view through a big window, so it's nice.
Tell me about some of your early experiences, because you had a chance to work at some highly acclaimed wineries in the area.
After graduating from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, I worked at Testarossa Winery in Los Gatos, and that was my first harvest. While I was in college, actually, I worked in a tasting room in Paso Robles. I worked at Eberly Winery for a few years, which was really fun. Great, yeah. I also worked in a 1,000-acre vineyard in the Central Valley, which was probably the hardest job I've ever had, working for minimum wage, 60 hours a week. But yeah, after I worked at Testarossa, I went and traveled to Australia, and I worked at Torbreck Winery in the Barossa Valley. Nice. And I came back and worked at Joseph Phelps in Napa. And then I went down to New Zealand and worked at Craigie Range Winery there, which is beautiful, and came back and I started working at Flowers Winery. So that was in 2007, and I worked there for a couple of years and really got to know the Sonoma Coast. And I already knew that I loved making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but coming here and like just seeing this part of the world really, and I just fell in love when there's something very special about this place that has that very much the coastal influence, and the Goldridge sandy loam soils here just I feel like has a very unique character to the Pinot and Chardonnay that we make here.
And those are the ones that captured your heart and your taste buds.
Yes, definitely. And so after I worked at Flowers for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to kind of challenge myself to do something completely different. And so I went to work at Cayman Wines in Sonoma, and I worked there working with Mark Harold and making very big extracted cab with 80% new oak, and it's just really, really different from what I do for LaRue. But it was a really great experience, and I loved being able to kind of challenge myself to think about winemaking a little bit differently than I had been.
And I need to, again, remind my listeners that you're only in your mid-30s. After hearing all that, it's like, my gosh, how did she cram that into like 15 years of winemaking?
Yeah, I definitely, well, especially the time out at Flowers, because I actually lived out there for like 6 months. And then from then I was commuting from Petaluma, and just being out there, it's really out in the middle of nowhere. Your cell phone doesn't work, and there's really nothing else to do but make wine and really focus on learning more and kind of just read books about winemaking and other.
I think they planned it that way. Yeah. Technology? No. We don't need any electrics down here.
We just want everybody to work. But yeah, after, for me, I think a big part of it is I love what I do. And to me, spending the weekends, quote unquote, working is not really that working for me, so
it's your passion, it's your art, it's not work.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually started LaRue the year that I left Flowers, and when I left Flowers, I hadn't intended to start LaRue, but when Robert came and hired me, he said to me like, hey, if you want to make your own wine here, you can. And I laughed at him and said, I'm 26, I'm not going to be making my own wine anytime soon. And really shortly after that, Ross Cobb came to me and said, hey, I have some extra fruit from Emmeline and Rice Spivak and Coastlands Vineyard, and I think you should make your own wine. And I was like, all right, well, this is a good idea. And I had written my business plan as my senior project at Cal Poly to start a small winery. And
follow through.
and so I rewrote that business plan and started talking to people about investing, and everybody I spoke with either wanted 50% or 51%, and to me that just didn't really make sense because it was only meant to be about 500 cases. I hadn't intended to be bigger than that, so I had given up. And shortly after that, another winemaker came to me and said, hey, I'm going to loan you the money to do this, and I don't want any ownership in your business. And if there's any advice I can give you, it's don't give up ownership, and you pay me back when you can. And I have since paid him back. But it was really just everything coming together, and all those people just believing in me. And before I could think twice, I was going.
You got to love that inspirational support of saying that you should do that, you can do this, and why don't you do this?
Yeah, definitely. And for me too, I've always had my parents, and especially my dad. I have 2 sisters and no brothers, and if you ever met my dad, he's definitely a country guy who looks like he should have 3 sons. He even had boy nicknames for all of us. But he taught me how to drive a tractor and weld when I was like 12, and I always spent time and he doing mechanical things that I'm not necessarily naturally inclined to. But he always told me I could do whatever any guy could do, and don't ever let anybody tell you differently. So definitely a lot of that background as well really helped me to just jump.
Okay, that kind of makes sense because the descriptive words I saw on the website are you're scrappy and tenacious. And at this point, I wasn't seeing it. But I was like, okay, I can see how you could be scrappy and tenacious.
Yeah, that's funny.
Thanks to your father.
Yes, definitely.
Now, earlier it was stated that Katy, although she has accomplished quite a bit, is only in her mid-30s. So I asked the inevitable question.
Do you see yourself, like a lot of winemakers, doing this into your 70s and 80s?
Almost.
Which is still a long way away.
Yeah, most definitely. I can't imagine not making wine. Hopefully by then I'd be spending more time on the beach in the off season, but but definitely I see myself making wine for as long as I can.
If you want to be on the beach in the off season, don't go to Australia.
Yeah, totally.
That's when they're in the thick of it.
Yeah, I'll go to the Caribbean. There's no winemaking there.
Yeah, no. And if there is, it shouldn't be. Yeah,
totally. Make some rum.
Tell me about working with Les Claypool, who was the singer for Primus, a hard rock band. It's interesting. There's Les, and there's Maynard Keenan, who was also in the hard rock band Tool. He has vineyards in Arizona. And these guys, unlike a lot of personalities who want to be in the wine business, they actually own their own vineyards. And these guys are really serious about it, aren't they?
Yeah, and actually, Les and Maynard are friends, too, so it's kind of funny.
Surprise.
Yeah,
They've
exactly.
probably toured together at some point.
Yeah. But yeah, Les and Cheney are just really down-to-earth people, and they've lived in Occidental for, I think, over 20 years, and they still go on tour together and everything, and they are very involved in the winery and winemaking, and really just want to make a beautiful wine from the Sonoma Coast. And for them, they kind of got into it because they lived in the area and they loved drinking wine and they met a lot of people. And originally they were like, oh, let's just make some wine so that we have some wine to drink. And then I think they ended up making something like 4 or 5 tons that year, which was a lot more than what you can drink in a year. So
Well, they are rock musicians, and they know a lot of other rock musicians.
yeah, but still a lot of wine. So they decided to get serious about it and make wine to sell, and really have a passion for making some of the best wine on the Sonoma Coast. So they really love the wine and love what they do. So
Well, they probably wanted to have a future business anyway, because hard rock guys at 70, it's hard to watch. 70 years of age, it's less appealing, I should say. We kind of glanced over it, but what was it about your great grandmother with the name of LaRue that you felt she needed to get some recognition?
she lived to be 98 years old, and she was someone who always told me I could do whatever I wanted in life. For her, when I was like 10 or 12, she used to tell me, like, you don't have to get married really young. You can wait. She got married when she was 23, which back then was really old. But she said it was not for lack of suitors.
And I just love the way that sounds.
Yeah, exactly. But she wanted to be a teacher, so she was a teacher for a while, and then she met my great-grandpa, and they were together for almost 75 years. He lived an entire year longer than her. She lived long enough to know that LaRue was being named after her. She didn't get to try the wine, but she knew it was being named after her. And when I told her, she said, "Well, can't say you picked the best name in the world, but it'll do."
That's a wonderful name.
Yeah, she for some reason she didn't really like it, but like her own name, not the wine.
Well, she sounds tenacious. Was she scrappy?
Yeah, yes. People say I'm like her, so. Yeah, she was always there for me and always telling me like to do what I wanted in life, and so.
Well, Katy, it's been a real pleasure talking with you. We have a couple more wines to taste, I guess, so we should probably put the microphone down and concentrate on that. But what a real pleasure to come out here and meet you and chat with you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very nice meeting you as well.
Find out so much more about Katy at LaRueWines.com. LARUE wines.com. She's celebrating 10 years with her brand and has a long career ahead of her. Today's show was once again researched, written, produced, and edited by me, Jeff Davis. Music on today's show was composed by Don Julin and Alistair King. Find more interviews and interesting tidbits at onthewineroad.com and on Facebook at On the Wine Road. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at JD Wine Road. It's always a pleasure to talk with those who have the calling to craft the nectar of the gods and passing their stories on to you. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon during my next venture on the Wine Road.